The grove was silent, the kind of silence that lingers after a battlefield has spent its fury. Olive branches trembled in the warm North African wind, brushing against the steel flank of a machine that should not have been left behind. Its gun, long, heavy, and once feared, rested motionless, casting a thin shadow across the dusty ground. Whoever had stood here last had fled in haste, leaving behind more than a weapon. They had left behind a secret. Soldiers approached cautiously, expecting booby traps, expecting scorched metal or a charred frame. Instead, they found a giant perfectly intact, a war machine whose presence alone had once halted entire advances. Yet here it stood, untouched, its armor unscarred, its engines silent, its fuel tanks nearly dry. Sometimes a battlefield yields trophies, other times it yields revelations. What makes a weapon truly powerful? The thickness of its armor, the sharpness of its gun, or the unseen lifeline that keeps it moving? And what happens when that lifeline fails? In the fading light of the North African campaign, the Allies would soon learn that even the mightiest machine carries a hidden weakness, one that can shape the fate of entire armies. Before the great tank duels of Europe, before its name carried a shadow across every battlefield, the German heavy tank made its first true entrance far from home. North Africa in late 1942 was a theater in collapse for Axis forces, a shrinking perimeter around Tunisia, battered by air attacks, cut off by Allied naval power, and starved of the supplies required to sustain modern mechanized warfare. Yet, into this deteriorating landscape came a machine that many believed could change the course of the campaign. When the first elements of Heavy Panzer Battalion 501 disembarked in Tunisia, they brought with them something the Allies had only heard whispers about: thick armor that could blunt nearly any projectile of its time. An 88mm gun capable of destroying enemy tanks at more than a mile. A 56-ton frame that radiated both menace and confidence. It was a weapon born from Germany's belief that superior engineering could offset strategic adversity. To American and British intelligence officers, the early reports sounded like exaggeration. A tank weighing over 55 tons, armor 100mm thick, a gun that could destroy a Sherman or a Churchill before they were even close enough to return fire. Such claims seemed like battlefield folklore. After all, German forces in North Africa had relied mostly on Panzer III and Panzer IV medium tanks, formidable, but familiar. But the reality arrived with the rumble of heavy engines, dust rising behind their tracks, a new silhouette on the horizon that did not match any known German vehicle. In the final months of the North African campaign, the Allies would learn that this machine was no myth. It was real, and it was here. The first clashes came swiftly, catching American forces at a moment when confidence still outweighed experience. In February 1943, during the fighting around Sidi Bouzid and the passes leading toward Kasserine, the German attacks unfolded with a precision the newly arrived U.S. armored units had not yet learned to counter. And behind the screen of Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks, the heavy German machines advanced, slow, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Sherman crews reported seeing their rounds ricochet harmlessly off thick frontal plates. An Allied tank might fire 3, 4, even 5 shots before realizing the truth. They were too far away, aiming at an enemy they could not penetrate. The German heavy tank, by contrast, fired back with calm efficiency, its long 88mm gun seeking out targets well beyond the reach of American gunners. The psychological effect was immediate and profound. From these early engagements emerged a term that would haunt armored units for months: tiger phobia. It was not simply fear of the machine, but fear of the unknown. Reports of a single heavy tank in the area could delay an advance, trigger urgent calls for artillery, or provoke requests for fighter-bomber support even when no heavy tanks were present. Medical officers recorded stress reactions among crews who had survived their first encounters. The weapon's true power was amplified by rumor, uncertainty, and the shock of sudden battlefield losses. Yet, beneath the fear, a strategic truth remained hidden. The German heavy tank was far from invincible, but in early 1943, few Allied crews had any way of knowing that. As the fighting intensified across central Tunisia, the German heavy tank entered the battlefield not as a rare curiosity, but as a deliberate spearpoint. Its presence reshaped the rhythm of combat. American armored units learned quickly that traditional tactics, rapid maneuver, flanking drives, and massed Sherman formations could collapse the moment a German Tiger tank appeared on the high ground or emerged from a concealed position behind supporting anti-tank guns. On open terrain, it dominated. Its optics were sharper, its guns steadier, its armor thick enough to let crews weather hits that would have crippled any other vehicle. Engagements that should have lasted minutes ended in seconds. At Sidi Bouzid and in the approaches to Kasserine Pass, entire platoons of Shermans found themselves outranged before they could even identify where the incoming fire originated. The kill ranges were unlike anything most American crews had imagined possible. Even when few in number, the German Tiger tanks acted as force multipliers. Their long-range accuracy allowed German commanders to anchor defensive lines around them, or to push offensives with confidence that these steel giants could blunt any armored counterattack. To the soldiers on the ground, the battlefield seemed to shift whenever a Tiger was reported nearby. But while the machine stood at its tactical peak, cracks were beginning to form, cracks invisible in the chaos of combat, but unmistakable in the quiet moments between engagements. Behind the battlefield glamour, the German Tiger tank carried burdens invisible to the crews who faced it in combat. Its armor and firepower demanded an engine pushed to its limits, a transmission that strained under every mile, and a logistical network that Germany could no longer sustain in North Africa. In the war diaries of Heavy Panzer Battalion 501, the truth appeared in quiet, methodical entries, numbers falling week by week, vehicles listed as non-operational, not from enemy fire but from the weight of their own engineering. The battalion had arrived with 20 Tigers. Within a month, barely 14 could move. By late January, fewer than a dozen remained operational. Spare parts were scarce. Engines failed under desert heat. Track links wore out faster than they could be replaced. Most troubling of all was fuel. Each German Tiger tank consumed more gasoline in a single day of movement than an entire platoon of lighter vehicles. Supply convoys, already vulnerable to Allied aircraft, could not deliver enough to keep these machines running. To the Allied crews who faced them, the Tigers seemed unstoppable. But within German lines, decisions grew increasingly desperate, choosing which vehicles to fuel, which to repair, which to abandon. Every mile cost precious fuel. Every maneuver drained reserves that could not be replenished. Even at the height of its battlefield dominance, the Tiger's greatest weakness had already begun to erode its strength. By the spring of 1943, the North African campaign was collapsing with a speed that stunned even seasoned observers. Allied pressure mounted from every direction, armor pushing through the passes, infantry advancing along the coast, bombers striking roads and convoys with relentless precision. For the Axis, Tunisia became a shrinking cage. And within that cage, the German Tiger tank, once the symbol of battlefield intimidation, began to fall silent, one machine at a time. Heavy Panzer Battalion 501 watched its strength evaporate, not in great fireballs or catastrophic penetrations, but in stillness. A Tiger without fuel was not a weapon. It was a stranded monument. Crews recorded the grim arithmetic: engines failing, transmissions seizing, tanks running dry before they ever reached the front line. Commanders were forced to abandon fully functional vehicles simply because fuel trucks never arrived. Amid this retreat, one machine met its fate quietly. Pressed by Allied advances and overwhelmed by logistical collapse, the crew of a single German Tiger tank made their final choice. They left the vehicle intact, no demolition charges, no attempt to disable the gun, no time for second thoughts. The machine sat in an olive grove near Tunis, its tracks coated in dust, its engine still warm when the crew fled. That tank would later be identified as Tiger 712, a weapon feared by many, yet undone not by enemy fire, but by the simple absence of fuel. In the chaos of the Axis collapse, it became a relic waiting to be found. When Allied engineers reached the olive grove, they found more than an abandoned vehicle. They found an opportunity unmatched in the North African campaign. Tiger 712 stood untouched, hatches closed, armor unscarred, gun locked in place as if waiting for its next command. The discovery ignited immediate interest among intelligence officers, who understood the rarity of capturing a German Tiger tank intact. The decision was made swiftly. The vehicle would be recovered, transported, and studied in detail. Moving a nearly 57-ton machine across Tunisia was a logistical feat in itself. American recovery vehicles strained under loads far beyond their design limits. Bridges were tested for weight, bypasses carved into hillsides, and convoys forced to travel at night to avoid Luftwaffe attention, though German air power was already fading. What should have been a short journey took days. But the tank reached Tunis, was loaded onto a Liberty ship, and began its voyage across the Atlantic. When Tiger 712 arrived at Aberdeen Proving Ground, it entered a different kind of battlefield, one defined by test instruments, measuring tapes, and controlled trials. Engineers examined every component: the interleaved road wheels, the torsion bar suspension, the Maybach engine, the thick layers of armor. But the most revealing tests focused on fuel consumption. On smooth roads, the Tiger burned fuel at rates far higher than expected. Off-road, the numbers grew alarming. Under simulated combat, the tank consumed fuel so quickly that its operational range collapsed to a fraction of its theoretical capability. For the first time, the Allies saw clearly what battlefield encounters could not reveal. The Tiger's greatest vulnerability was not its armor or its gun, but its appetite. The data gathered at Aberdeen Proving Ground did more than explain why so many Tigers had been found abandoned across North Africa. It reshaped Allied thinking about armored warfare itself. For American commanders, the numbers told a story more powerful than battlefield rumors. A German Tiger tank might dominate a duel, but it could not sustain an advance. It could not pursue withdrawing forces. It could not exploit a breakthrough. It was a giant whose strength depended entirely on a fragile supply chain, one that Allied air power was tearing apart piece by piece. Army Ordnance compiled the results into classified reports distributed across every armored formation in late 1943. These documents emphasized a new doctrine. Defeating the Tiger did not require matching it in armor or firepower. It required understanding its limits. Instead of frontal engagements, units were urged to force German heavy tanks to maneuver each mile a drain on their already limited fuel reserves. Maneuver warfare, and American strength, became a weapon against the Tiger's greatest weakness. Training films reinforced this message. Crews learned that the German Tiger tank often appeared in small numbers, that its fuel consumption restricted its movements, and that a tactically superior enemy could still be overcome through operational endurance. A Sherman battalion, with its wider range and reliable supply network, could outmaneuver and outlast a heavier opponent. As long as fuel and ammunition flowed, mobility remained the American advantage. Across the world, the same pattern emerged. In Italy, Normandy, and the Eastern Front, captured German documents revealed identical struggles. Heavy tank battalions received fuel in quantities too small to support real mobility. Commanders lamented idle Tigers sitting in defensive positions because orders forbade unnecessary movement. During the Ardennes offensive, an operation built around the hope of seizing Allied fuel dumps, the flaw became catastrophic. Once fuel ran out, German armored columns halted in place, leaving even the most powerful tanks stranded on frozen roads. For military planners and historians alike, the lesson resonated. Armored warfare is a marriage of firepower and logistics. Without both, even the strongest machines become liabilities. Tiger 712, once feared for its battlefield dominance, now served as a bridge between these two truths, showing the United States and its allies that wars are not won solely by superior weapons, but by the systems that keep those weapons moving. Today, the silent hull of Tiger 712 rests far from the olive grove where it was abandoned. At Fort Moore, Georgia, its armor is cut open, its interior exposed for students and historians to study. The long barrel of its 88mm gun points toward nothing in particular now, its purpose no longer destruction, but instruction. Time has turned the once feared machine into a teacher, and the lesson it carries is deeper than steel, thicker than armor, and more enduring than any battlefield victory. For all its battlefield power, the German Tiger tank could never escape the limits imposed by its design. Firepower and protection made it formidable. Fuel consumption made it fragile. Strategy thrives on endurance, not single moments of dominance. A weapon that cannot move when needed loses its value, no matter how impressive its performance in isolated engagements. Tiger 712 embodies that paradox. A machine capable of defeating any opponent in a duel, yet incapable of sustaining the demands of a war fought across continents. In the decades after World War II, American tank designers took the lesson to heart. From the M48 Patton to the M1 Abrams, mobility and operational range were treated not as secondary considerations, but as pillars equal to armor and firepower. The story of Tiger 712, through every test, every fuel measurement, every page of analysis left an imprint on the doctrine that shaped modern armored warfare. And so the tank that once terrified Allied crews now influences their successors in a quieter but far more lasting way. It reminds us that victory depends not only on the strength of a weapon, but on the strength of the system that supports it. Logistics, supply lines, fuel, maintenance, these are the hidden forces that determine the fate of armies. As you reflect on the journey of Tiger 712, consider the modern battlefield. Are there weapons today that, like the Tiger, shine brightly in performance but strain the logistics meant to sustain them? In war, brilliance without endurance is a fleeting advantage. Endurance without brilliance is a missed opportunity. True mastery lies in the balance. If stories like this deepen your appreciation for military history, consider joining us for the next chapter. The lessons of the past still shape the battles of tomorrow.